What's up everyone, welcome to Workshop Rebuilding. Today's episode on the John Deere 400 garden tractor, I'll be tearing it into bits and pieces, so let's dig right into it. In my previous episodes, I shared with you guys my new project, which is the John Deere 400 garden tractor. In part 2 of this series, I shared with you guys the first startup of the Kohler K532 on the John Deere 400 garden tractor. After that, I took it for a quick spin, but I noticed some things weren't functioning properly. But I do have this John Deere 400 as a new project, and I will restore this garden tractor to not just look good, but also to run and drive perfectly without any leaks throughout the whole drivetrain. So let's dig right into the disassembly. I managed to remove a whole bunch of green panels on the John Deere 400, the hood, side panels, and the rear fender. I also went ahead and removed the front grille. Everything seems very similar to John Deere 300 Series garden tractor, but the John Deere 400 has a couple bolts more to tighten down the bigger panels. Now I'll go ahead and remove the instrumental panel, dash, and steering column so I can have access to the drivetrain, which is the engine, and the hydrostatic motor in the back. Once the instrumental panel is gone, I will remove the engine, remove the driveshaft, and then the rear end. I will be left with the bare frame on 4 wheels, and then I'll see what I can take apart next. So let's dig into it. managed to remove the instrumental panel, dash panel, and wiring harness, and I'll share with you guys how that looks like. On the ground next to the machine, I have the instrumental panel. Everything is very similar as on the John Deere 300 series garden tractors. Off to the right, we do have the PTO engagement lever, which is off to the right. It is welded into the instrumental panel, and on the inside, we have the lever action. I will have to make sure that this will become a little bit tighter since it is loose on this fit. So I'll leave that aside, and once I get to it, I'll make sure everything works and looks perfectly. Down below, I have the wiring harness of the John Deere 400. Everything is very similar once again as on the John Deere 300. We do have a couple more switches because the PTO is activated by hand. So we do have a switch which activates that just in case you have it on, you will not be able to start the tractor. Therefore, the lever will have to be touching the switch. If any of you guys want me to do a wiring harness rebuild video, leave a comment down below, let me know. If there are many people, I will do a rebuild video on this wiring harness right here. If not, I'll just clean it up and go through it and make sure everything works. So without further ado, I'll share with you guys the tractor in its current state, and then we'll head on to the back and remove some more parts. At the John Deere 400, everything is black. There is not one green panel on this tractor anymore. We do have the yellow rims, which give it a little bit color, but we'll leave the tires and rims on for now. Up front, the engine is still mounted. I will leave that in there for now. Moving ahead around the instrumental panel, I still have the steering column, the hydraulic levers, and the forward and reverse. So everything in here will be removed very soon. Moving on to the back, we have our hydraulic motor, which is very oily, our drive shaft down below. Below this bracket, we have our fan, and then in the rear, we have our differential or rear end. Behind the whole tractor, we have the 3-point hitch, which is still hooked up, and the rear PTO. I think my best bet would be to remove all this in the back since these are attachments. Once this is removed, we can then move ahead and remove some of this stuff which is around the instrumental panel. So it's the next day and I'm back in the shop. Yesterday got pretty late on me and it's getting darker much sooner. I am back on the John Deere 400 today. I left off on the rear end. I was removing the 3-point hitch connections. I will leave the rear axle in there for now because I will be removing the engine once I'm done with the 3-point assembly. So let's dig right into the rear end, and then after that I'll remove the engine. I managed to remove the 3-point hitch and all the accessories around the 3-point hitch, as well as the lift cylinder, and I'll show you how that looks like. With the John Deere 400, the 3-point hitch has been successfully removed and all the components around the 3-point hitch. So now we're left with the frame and the rear end. The rear end is still bolted to the frame, but we'll leave that on for now. In this area lies the 3-point hitch, and I removed everything prior to this. Off to the right of the rear end, we had the cylinder which would lift and lower the 3-point hitch. But I'll go ahead and share with you guys the parts that I removed from the rear end. All these parts on the ground are parts which belong to the 3-point hitch. So we have the pivot shaft, which is right here. The cylinder, which is really oily and grimy, is right there. The piston of the cylinder will hook up to this side. Once the hydraulics are activated, it will pivot on this shaft and lift up these 2 points, which hook up to your lower arms on the 3-point hitch, your left and your right side lower arms. The 3-point hitch consists of 2 points on the bottom and 1 on the top. The last one on the top is the top link right here, and this is adjustable. You can adjust this by hand. As you guys can see, there's a thread on the bottom and on the top. With this little bar or rod right here, you can turn this around and it will extend or contract this top link. This top link is hooked up and fixated to a fixed shaft or bar, and this lies on the top of the frame. So we have 2 on the bottom and 1 on the top, and that will give us enough support to mount certain attachments or implements on the rear of the tractor. So I shared with you guys information on the 3-point hitch. I shared with you guys some details of what the 3-point hitch consists of. And now I'll go ahead and remove the engine. To remove the engine, I will have to disassemble some parts on the front of the engine so I can expose the engine by itself. Once that's done, I'll get the engine hoist and lift this engine out of the frame. You guys just saw me remove the flywheel adapter, the 4 engine mount bolts, and the 2 belts up front. Once that was done, I was able to hoist up the engine with the engine hoist, and this is what I'm left with. The engine is on the ground, it's safe and sound. I didn't see any hookup points on the engine. Usually on the intake manifold bolts, they have a little bracket so you can lift up the engine. This engine did not have anything, so I hooked it up on one side of the intake manifold and on the exhaust manifold right there. It came out a little bit crooked, but that's okay. Everything went as planned and nothing dropped on the ground. So it's on the ground right now, and this is how it looked like underneath the engine. We have a whole bunch of oil and grime and sediment up around the engine. It looks like there's some fresh oil right there. It's possible that the engine is leaking somewhere, or it might just be the fittings on the hydraulic hoses, but there is some oil in this area which I will have to address. The pulley tensioner is right here. This does not turn very good and it doesn't move as it should, so I'm gonna have to fix that. The other pulley is down below. That needs a little bit of cleanup. It's not turning or spinning freely. On the back end, the adapter is right here. I took it off this way, and I noticed that these bolts on the adapter are very loose for some reason. I didn't want to punch out the pin because this is still a tight fit, so I'm going to leave it on right there. And once I drop in the engine again, I will just bolt on this to the engine. So then basically everything will be lined up very nicely. The joints on the U-joint look very good, and everything seems to be very tight here. That's good. What I can do is remove the drive shaft on the pump side, and then I can get to all of this in the middle. So I managed to take a whole bunch of parts off the John Deere 400, and I'll share with you guys how it looks like. In front of me, I have the John Deere 400, which is still on wheels. The rear end is still within the frame, and the front axle is still hooked up to the main frame. Over there is the Kohler K532, and the fuel tank is right beside the toolbox. I will leave this John Deere as a rolling frame because I plan on taking it outside and giving it a nice wash with the pressure washer. I will go ahead and look into the rear end. I will not look at the hydrostatic motor, but I will look at the rear end. I noticed that it was leaking down below. It could be from the cylinder, which was off to the right over here, but there is a seam right here which has a gasket, and it could be leaking on that. So I will be tearing into this, and if I do tear into it, I will also share with you guys how I put it back together. That's why I will not go into detail in today's video on the rear end. If you guys have seen in the middle around the instrumental panel, there is the main valve block. I might tear into that and give the whole block new O-rings if I'm already at it and I'm this deep into it. I think the only way to take that out is to remove so much which is around that valve block and or just dropping it down below. I do not have much on the tractor anymore, and that's why I have a feeling I will be looking at that very soon. On the front, we still have the front axle, the front spindles, front wheels, and the steering cylinder, which is underneath the axle. I will also go ahead and look at all these pulleys up front and make sure that the bearings are good. So I will tear into that, and I also will share a rebuild video on all of this up front. So the way the frame sits currently, I will not do anything else to it until I get to the disassembly of all these parts and the rebuild of all these parts. I have many parts that came off this tractor, and I have to see where I can store them all, but I will be starting on cleaning all the parts up. And once all the parts are cleaned, I'll bring you guys back for a rebuild video on this John Deere 400. Every part that will need to be replaced and or refurbished, I'll share with you guys, and I will go into detail on the functions of this John Deere 400 garden tractor. So if you guys like this video, please hit that like button down below. It helps this channel massively. Consider subscribing if you haven't already, as I'll be rebuilding this John Deere 400. I will be sharing updates with you guys on the John Deere 300, the Thomas skid steer, the Gravely garden tractor, and many more items which I will be rebuilding very soon. So as always, stick around.